And if I were a betting man, I'd say that he probably logs 6 to 8 hours a day playing one of those, Fortnite or one of those video games where you're doing nothing but dehumanizing people by blowing their heads out. Blowing their heads off, one after another after another.
How long are we going to let, for example, and ignore at the federal level particularly, where they can do something about the video game industry? In this manifesto that we believe is from the shooter, this manifesto, he talks about living out his super soldier fantasy on Call of Duty. And there have been studies that say it impacts people and studies that says it does not. But I look at the common denominators as a 60-some-year-old father and grandfather myself. What's changed in this country? We've always had guns, we've always had evil, but what's changed where we see this rash of shooting? And I see a video game industry that teaches young people to...
But the idea of these video games to dehumanize individuals, to have a game of shooting individuals and others, I've always felt that is a problem for future generations and others. When you look at these photos of how it took place, you can see the actions within video games and others.
Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately.
Hey, yo, mic check, 1 2 1 2. What's going on with y'all, man? What's happening? If you've been rocking with me, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. This is your dread-headed host with yet another dose, keeping you engrossed from coast to coast. That's right. Now, today, before we get into it, I'm sure a lot of you have heard here in the States, we've had another round of mass shootings take place in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas. Senseless violence that have claimed the lives of so many that the numbers just keep seeming to add up. It's almost uncanny how numb you get to the reports of this type of violence because it's been so widespread. So I do want to kind of talk about that in the subject matter, and I'm going to do my best to be respectful to the families and the loved ones that were lost in this senseless violence, but I am not going to be pulling my punches in terms of my vernacular when I'm speaking about the political pundits and that who have weighed in on the violence so far. Specifically, I want to address the notion that somehow violent video games are responsible for the rise in gun violence in America. Now, this is not the first time that the blame has been placed at the doorstep of video games and gamers alike. Back in Sandy Hook, when that first came out, that was one of the main things that they were pushing at the time, other than it being a conspiracy, which is asinine. They were pushing that, yes, because of games like Call of Duty or Halo, your first-person shooters, even maybe a Grand Theft Auto, violent video games or video games where excess violence are displayed, that somehow that was actually the cause of the rise in mass shootings and gun violence in America. Now, if you know me at all, you already know that I think that's some old bullshit. I mean, come on. I've played Grand Theft Auto since I was 6 years old. Never have I ever shot somebody in cold blood. All right. There is literally no correlation. They're citing data that does not exist. All right. And these are people who have a voice. All right, I'm talking from political pundits that just appear occasionally on CNN and Fox News to the president of the goddamn United States. That's right, Donald Trump himself came out during that press conference when he was addressing it and blamed squarely, said video games are the cause, or at least one of the causes. But he didn't really make that differentiation. He pretty much placed the blame there. Skirted around the fact that there are too many guns in America in the first place. Skirted around the fact that even though he is super trying to champion, checks for mental health and things like that, trying to place these shootings, blame them on mental health issues in video games. Never mind the fact that he actually repealed the Obama era legislation that they had in place where they did have stricter checks for people with mental health issues in terms of getting access to firearms. All right, they repealed that. So he says that he cares. Once again, it's Donald Trump talking out of the side of his neck. You really, really got to research what he's saying. Most of what comes out of his mouth is either just a bold-faced lie or wildly mischaracterized. Okay? Now, that's not to say that I don't agree that there needs to be something in place, but the fact that there was before, then it was repealed, and now that something else has happened, you wanted to kind of renege and go back. No, I'm not going to let that slide. But I'm not here to talk about the policies that he screwed up. I'm here to talk about specifically the idea, the notion that video games are the cause of gun violence. It doesn't make any sense. There is no data to support that. As a matter of fact, there's data supporting the opposite. All right. None of these people are going to cite any actual sources. If you listen to them, none of them actually say, oh, if you look to this CDC study or whatever study that shows this, they're not doing that because they know that there's not actually data there to support what they're saying. The reason that they choose video games is because the video game industry is kind of a soft target, I'd say. At least it was, especially back when the first couple mass shootings started happening. And it's just insane to even say that phrase, the first couple of mass shootings. It makes me sick. But it's true. At the time, when they were blaming it on the video games was a much more niche community, I would argue, than it is today. If you look back like 2004, yeah, there are a lot of people playing Call of Duty, and yeah, Halo was huge. Xbox was out in force, or I don't even know if Halo 1 I think was out at the time. But yeah, those games existed. But the gaming community were still kind of considered to be fringe, a whole bunch of nerds playing video games. So if I am a politician, right, if I'm going to place blame on something, it has to be something that I'm not afraid to lose support from. So the video game community, the gamer community, they didn't care whether or not they lost support from them. They didn't care about blaming them or mischaracterizing people that play video games because they just assumed it was niche and it wouldn't matter. Soft target, easy to point to. You can draw a correlation there without having any sort of data. You're very simple-minded and you think, oh, yes, well, of course, people getting shot in video games, that must mean, that must be triggering this violence. Never mind the fact that Mortal Kombat fatalities have been around since the Sega Genesis. Okay? Never mind the fact that Turok existed on N64. Never mind the fact that Conker's Bad Fur Day was way more vulgar and violent than a lot of the games that we see today. Cartoon violence maybe, but violence, bloodshed nonetheless. But they didn't point to that then. Nowadays, we're starting to see them point to video games more and more consistently. Although I would argue, here's what's interesting. Here's my take on this. They're not, while they've been able to do that in the past to very little kind of pushback from the community, I don't think they're going to be able to continue to do that. Because nowadays, video games, the gaming industry has been legitimized by money. All right, we have children out here winning millions of dollars in Fortnite competitions, esports streaming on ESPN, sponsorships, Monster, Mountain Dew. There's so much money to be had in the industry now. Now the industry is legitimate. Now, I guarantee we're going to start to see pushback from people with actual data, from people that are in the industry. They're going to come out and say, I guarantee you one of these streamers is going to have something to say. If only a little bit. They're going to defend it. They say, no, this is a community that's actually, it seems to be a little bit safer for people if they want to go play out some type of violent fantasies. They would do it in this virtual space where they're not actually hurting anyone. A lot of people are going to come to the defense. And I think we're actually going to see people start to back off of that argument moving forward. Not just because it's a shit argument when there's no data to back it up. Not just because it's disrespectful to the people whose lives were lost and their families and loved ones that we're even entertaining the notion that video games are responsible for the loss of life. It's going to be because now there's money to be had. So when you have corporations like ESPN running esports, when you have people like Ninja blowing up on Fortnite, becoming one of the biggest celebrities, you got Drake playing with them, streaming with them. Now the industry, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to just take pot shots at it without any proof. So hopefully, we'll start to see them moving towards some actual comprehensive solutions. But I just had to come out here for a second and point out how dumb, how ignorant that idea is, that violent video games are the cause of these tragedies. I'm going to need all these politicians, all these pundits, all these people that have since opened up their mouth to say this disrespectful ass shit to apologize. Not just because it's wrong, but because passing the buck is exactly what has us still in this situation to this day. Decades later, after some of the first mass shootings, and we're still talking about, it must be video games that are doing it. We're not going to point to Hollywood. We're not going to point to say, I don't know, That Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw, it was just high-octane violence and explosions for 2.5 hours? No. We're not gonna shame The Rock, and it's not The Rock's fault. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming Dwayne The Rock Johnson for violence in America. No. That would be dumb. That would be just as ignorant as blaming video games. That's not it. But to just point at video games, violent video games, as the trigger, the catalyst, as if violence doesn't surround our culture at every turn. I mean, you turn on the TV, Marvel movies. I mean, Tony Stark killed a whole bunch of people in Iron Man 1. If y'all don't remember that. When he pulled up to the Middle East at first, he wiped that whole terrorist cell out. All right, like dome shot at all of them. Captain America killed some Nazis, but was killing nonetheless. I mean, all of that. A whole bunch of death, violence, destruction. Again, not blaming Marvel specifically. Hollywood, though. I mean, every Tarantino movie, you go back and look at that. Oh my God, Django? And that's supposed to be exaggerated. But again, violence is everywhere. But they're not blaming Hollywood. They're not saying, oh, well, these movies. No, because there's a lot of money and influence in Hollywood right now. So they wouldn't dare just turn around and haphazardly place the blame of something like this at their doorstep. No, that's not how it works because of the industry, because of the money that's trading hands in that situation. They wouldn't dare do that without some type of data to back it up. Whereas video games, up to this point, has been niche. Not anymore. Not anymore. And we will not have it. I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for playing Grand Theft Auto as if somehow Grand Theft Auto caused all these mass shootings. They're ignoring the manifestos that have been leaked online. They're ignoring the rhetoric that most of these shooters have been using, which has so many similarities, it's crazy. I mean, if you want to draw a line, look at the rhetoric. White nationalism is alive and well. Hasn't never really went anywhere, but now we're starting to see these instances of domestic terrorism pop up all over the place. But video games are it. Not the fact that the president is running his mouth every other day, talking about go back to your country, go back to your shithole country. I'm sorry, let me quote him correctly. Calling people rapists and gang members, inciting violence, very inflammatory language. Some people would say, oh, well, he's just talking. You can't blame him for the words that he used. Okay. If that were true, then you couldn't blame video games, which are just images in a make-believe world. The difference is what he is saying as the president of the United States. His words have weight to them. We are not just going to sit here and act like they don't. Even if you don't like him, he's still the president of the United States. All right? If he says something, we need to be paying attention because it means something. All right? One comment from him can incite a mass shooting or tank an economy or start a war. And these are facts. I'm not even exaggerating. These are just straight facts. It's not just Donald Trump. Any president, anyone that's sitting in that chair would have that kind of power because that's the kind of power that office holds. All right? But what we're not going to do is turn around and blame it on a niche community. What we're not going to do is sit here and muddy the water as we talk about how we're going to fix this problem that's been ongoing for decades now. What we're not going to do is confuse the simple public who's not really going to look into this. They're not going to check to see if what they're saying, what they heard on TV is right. All right, the people that voted for Donald Trump, they take his word at face value all the time. They do. And then there are some people who just don't feel like researching. So they'll see somebody else that's maybe not Donald Trump, but another Republican or whoever, come out and blame video games. They say, well, if so-and-so did it, maybe Donald Trump's kind of wild, but I believe this dude. All right, but it's all wrong. It's not even just a miscarriage of information. It is a bold-faced lie. But that's what they'd have you believe. So, everyone, my gamers out there, go ahead, hurry up and finish your campaigns. Finish your campaigns, all right? Get that DLC. Knock out that multiplayer that you've been trying to get at on that new Modern Warfare. Go ahead and get it out there. Because as of right now, it's looking like they're getting ready to censor. They're getting ready to start banning games. They're getting ready to crack down on a community that has no ties to these mass shootings. I mean, the closest you got was in the manifesto. I think the dude from El Paso or Dayton. It was El Paso. I can't remember. I'm not going to say his name because he's a piece of shit, both of them. But one of them had mentioned that they were living out their super soldier fantasy on Modern Warfare. And then they latched on to that, and the media fucking ran with it. No shame. Ran with it. Oh, well, these video games got to go, I guess. Ignored all the stuff about how he hated Mexicans and this, that, and the other, and how he had Donald Trump, or the name Trump, written in rifles on his Facebook. No, we're going to go with the video games. We're going to blame the video games because that is the problem. The video games did it. Not the person holding the gun. Not the fact that there are too many of these guns out here in the first place. But the video game that he played when he was thinking about shooting somebody, that's what we're going to hold responsible. Not the lawmakers that have failed to pass sensible legislation to prevent this from happening or taking really any steps. Sometimes, in the case of the Trump administration, with their repeal of the Obama mental health checks for firearms, even rolled back, took steps back. We're not going to hold any of them responsible. No. Because this is America, and we don't take responsibility for our actions. We're going to blame video games. Soft target, blame video games. But you mark my words. You'll see in a little bit. All that, the gaming industry is going to clap back. Because this has been going on for too long. It's been alive for too long. And now there's money and influence behind it. Somebody's going to come back and correct this. So hopefully, after the clapback, we'll start to see some sensible, movements towards getting this issue solved. Getting this national emergency solved. If I can't feel safe going to the Walmart, how free is America really?